Moving on, we are looking into some basic concepts of, and these are basically things we have already discussed when we did programs, but just to familiarize with you, um, we have this field declaration formats which can be done with as formats that are given over here. You have a class, you have a variable declaration, you can declare it together, or you can declare it as separate variables and separate data types also. And then you have a method declaration over here. So basically these are things that you know already. You have a return type over here, the function name and the arguments can be passed to the variables that are created over here. And here you have a return type void, and here you have a return type int, which means there will be a return component or a variable will be returned, that is area over here. Now this deals with creation of an object. Now when we create an object, we usually show this statement. Actually this statement came from these two. So rectangle rect1 is basically declaring the object, and rect1 equal to new rectangle is basically instantiating the object. So these two statements can be combined together into this one. Rectangle, which belongs to the class name, rect1, which is a object name, and rectangle, which is the constructor over here. And accessing the class members, we have already seen it. We can access a variable name, and we saw that if it is a instance variable or a static variable, we can do that, but not for a local variable. And you can access a function using this code object name dot method name. These things we already know. And we are moving into the next topic. A program is given over here. You can try running it on your own and see how it works. Basically, this is an explanation of all the concepts that we have given over here. So this should be self-explanatory based on whatever you have learned so far. So let me move on to the next topic. A constructor. A default constructor, if it is given, it can be given with the format like this: perimeter and the parenthesis, and length will be initialized with 0 and width will be initialized with 0. A parameterized constructor, on the other way, will be having parameters inside this bracket, and then it can be initialized with the value that is passed, that is x and y. So you have a program over here also, which basically executes the program, and you can see the constructor playing a role in this. The next topic that we are going to discuss here is method overloading, and this is something similar to what we had learned earlier called function overloading. Now, if you remember, function overloading was an example of polymorphism, where polymorphism dealt with the fact that a thing exists but it can execute multiple functions, like a function called add number. It can be if add number ab is there, it can be adding a and b and giving you the result c. If add number ABC is there, ABC can be added and you get the result in the form of D. Add number is a common function name which basically refers to method overloading. Again, function overloading in the case of C++, but when it comes to Java, it is basically known as method overloading. So methods have the same name but different parameter list and different definitions, used when objects are required to perform similar tasks but using different input parameters. An example of polymorphism. So you can see here that you have a room class over here, inside which you have three variables: length, breadth, and area. You have a constructor float x and float y, and x and y will be respectively given to length and breadth. And you have another constructor over here, room float x, which has got only one argument. Basically, it refers to the fact that this length and breadth will be initialized with the value x. Now you have a function called area, float area, which is again a function, and this area will be returning. If you look over here, this is a function with a return type float, and this function is their area. And now you can see that area will be calculated using length into breadth, and you'll be returning the area value. So basically you can see that these two are constructors. If you look over here, this is a constructor and this is another constructor, but they are different, where you have two arguments here and you have only a single argument here. Now constructor is also a method, it's a function, so it is an example of method overloading. And when you come to this main class, which is housing this main function over here, you have an object called obj1 belongs to the class called room, and this room is executing this constructor called room5, which means it is equivalent to this one, room floor tiles. So now here what will happen, length and breadth will be equal to 5. So here when you particularly display the value, it should be equal to 25. And then you have another constructor being called here, which is 7 5. So length will be 7 and breadth will be 5, and hence the result will be 35. So let's try running this particular program. So you try running that program. Basically, you have to add a keyword public also over here so that you can run this program without error. And when we execute this particular program, you can see that it is displaying 25 and 35 respectively, because the value is float, and hence you are getting it as 25.0 and 35.0. Again, you have another example of an overloading over here. You have basically the main function, and here you have another set of it's not a constructor, it is actually a function. So you have some basically the class here is main, and hence you have another function over here which is overwritten called sum. So previous case it was a constructor that is overloaded, and here it is the function, so or the method when we talk about in Java. So sum index and int y is there, which will be returning x plus y. You have another sum which is having 3 arguments, x, y, and z, which should be returning x plus y plus z. And you have some another function with the return type, or the return type double, which will be receiving the arguments double x and double y. So it will be returning to x plus y. And then you can see how this function will execute and what will be the result that will be coming in. So basically you are accessing the function using the object over here, which is an example of what we had discussed earlier, an object calling a method. So s dot sum 1020, s dot sum 10, 20, and 30 corresponding to this, and s dot sum 10.5 and 20.5 corresponding to this one. And the example of overloading is also given over here when it comes to static. So you can take a look at this, and that shouldn't be much difficult. We'll look into what is a static function in the next topic coming. Now we are talking about static members, and static members, or the definition of a static keyword, can be given to a variable as well as function. So if you look over here, we have this particular program over here. So what is a static variable? We already looked into what is a static variable here. So this thing should be explainable, and it should be clear over here. So if the member have to be common between the objects, that is a variable. So functions, if they have to be common between the objects, they have to be declared as static. So let's see what happens over here. You have a class called student, and this class has got a variable roll number, it has got a variable name, and it has got a static string variable college called its. Now this is a variable name over here. It is of data type string, but nothing is initialized, so it remains like this. But here having another string variable called college over here, which is also static, and it's declared as its in quotes. And you are having a constructor over here, student int r and string n. So I think this r corresponds to roll number, and this n corresponds to the name, and you'll be passing this as arguments to the program, and then r will be passed to roll number and n will be passed to the name, and you will be displaying this function. You are having a display function over there. So system.out.println roll number plus, you have a space over here, plus name plus college when it is declared. Now you're having a constructor being called over here, and an object is being called or created in the main function. So you have s1, which is the object, and it is running this constructor student 111 current. So basically if you look over here, what would that become? Then that particular student s1's roll number will be having 111, and that particular student's name will be object s1's name will be containing the variable name, the value current. Please note that roll number and name are not static, hence each object will get its own copy. Now similarly s2 is there. Now s2 is an object, and when it is being initialized, its roll number will contain 222, and its name will contain Aryan. And then you have the S1 and S2 calling the display function. Now when it calls the display function, basically it should be displaying the roll number, name and college. Now since this static variable is common between the objects, both will be containing ITS. So you can basically run this program and see. So that program is basically executed, and you can see that Karan and Aryan is being displayed with the static variable ITS. So with regard to static member variables, you can access the previous program also, where you had a static variable in the form of count, and you saw how it happens. That program can also be written or understood for understanding the concept of a static variable. Coming to static method, you can apply a keyword called static to a method, and what it basically means is that it belongs to the entire class rather than to the object of the class. A static method is basically used to modify the static data member and can change the value within it. So if you look at this particular program, you can see that you have a class called student. It has got a roll number variable, it has got a name variable, it has got a college variable called ITS, which is declared as static, and you're creating a static void change, a function change, which is having return type void, and it is declared as static. And you can see that the college name is changed to BBDIT, and you have a constructor. All the programs is same. I will try copying it. So we are going to run this program, and you can see that in the main function, this basically calls for a change. An object is basically or the class is being calling the change. So if you look over here, it is not the object that is calling this function, it is the class that is calling the function. So student dot change, it will be modifying this change function, or it is calling this change function, where the college variable will be substituted with BBDIT. So now that is a concept over here, and we are creating the objects S1, S2 and S3. Now it is calling this display function, and naturally what would happen, so that would be displaying the colleges, the entire details of the students, but with the college name as BBDIT. There is an error, sorry, a bracket might be missing. There was an issue with the brackets over there, so when you try running this program, please correct it. Make sure that the brackets are intact. It's as follows, and when you run this particular program, you can see that it is executed. So normally it should have been BBDITS. So now since the change is called, it has become BBDIT, and it's modified. So I have done a small modification over here. I rearranged the code, and I would like to show something new. So here in this main function, you're creating the objects over here with the initialized values. 111 Karan, 1222 Aryan, and 333 Sonu. And when it is calling the display functions, each object calling display function, it should be calling the college name. But here let me tell you that the code has been modified. The change came after this. So what would be the college variable value initially? It would be ITS. Now then it calls the change function, it becomes BBDIT. So S1 is being displayed again, and then you will be displaying it with the BBDIT string. I hope the concept is clear again.